The year was 2176, and the stars were no longer distant lights, far off and unreachable. Humanity had spread its wings far and wide across the galaxy, building colonies on distant planets, establishing trade routes, and even forging fragile alliances with alien civilizations. But among the stars, Earth's reputation was a curious one, respected, yet feared. Despite all of humanity's advancements, there was one constant that seemed to echo through the galaxy. Humans were unpredictable. They were survivors, and they fought not only to exist, but to thrive. Their will was unyielding, and that made them both formidable and dangerous. Captain Marcus Byrne of the Phoenix was a man who had embodied the chaotic spirit of humanity. A skilled fighter, tactician, and diplomat, Marcus had earned his reputation both on the battlefield and in the halls of galactic councils. His name was well known across the planets, both as a hero and as a threat. For every alliance forged through peaceful discussions, there had been another forged through violence. Earth's victories and its survival were never assured, and it was in this precarious position that Marcus found himself when a mysterious transmission from a planet known as Xyxarri arrived. The message, transmitted in a strange, mechanical voice, was simple. A duel. A challenge to your finest warrior. If you refuse, we will consider Earth weak and unworthy of further contact. Marcus leaned back in his command chair aboard the Phoenix as the transmission repeated. The words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Xyxarri was an ancient world, home to the Xyxarrians, an alien species that had been known for centuries for their intellect and strict adherence to logic. It was rare for them to engage in conflict, let alone challenge another species to a fight. So why now? Why this challenge? Captain, we've tried contacting them through diplomatic channels, but they're not responding, Lieutenant Irena Sato said, stepping into the command center with her usual calm demeanor. It seems they're serious about this duel. I see that, Lieutenant, Marcus replied, his voice laced with uncertainty. He turned to look out the viewports, where distant stars blinked like cold, indifferent eyes. The Xyxarrians don't strike me as a race that values combat. What's their angle here? Irena's brow furrowed, her mind working quickly. They've never been warlike, but their culture does include trials of strength, intelligence, and endurance. It's possible they view this duel as a means of testing our worthiness, our commitment to survival. Marcus nodded, understanding the logic, but something about it unsettled him. The Xyxarrians were known for their cold, almost robotic demeanor, lacking the passion and impulsive nature that humans often displayed. This wasn't a species that would issue such a challenge lightly. The fact that they had done so meant that something had shifted, something that Marcus couldn't yet understand. We need more information, Marcus said, standing up from his seat. Prepare the ship for immediate departure. Set course for Xyxarri. Irena's eyes met his, a flicker of concern in her expression. Are you sure about this? If we refuse the duel, we risk alienating them. If we accept, we might be walking into something we don't fully understand. Marcus met her gaze, his own eyes reflecting the weight of his decision. We can't afford to ignore this, Lieutenant. Earth can't afford to look weak. We're not just fighting for our survival, we're fighting for our future. Whatever the Xyxarrians want, we'll find out when we get there. The journey to Xyxarri was long, taking several days through the dark expanse of space. As the Phoenix approached the planet's orbit, the cold, barren surface of Xyxarri loomed before them, its rocky, gray surface stretching out endlessly, giving the impression of a dead world. The atmosphere was thin, the air toxic to humans without proper protection. There were no great cities to admire, no lush jungles or beautiful oceans. Only lifeless plains and mountains. Xyxarri, it seemed, was a world that had been drained of all warmth, both literally and figuratively. Marcus and his crew donned their spacesuits and boarded the shuttle that would take them to the surface. As they descended, the cold, harsh winds of Xyxarri battered the shuttle's hull and the landing was rough. They landed in a vast, desolate plain, the ground littered with jagged rocks and craters, remnants of some ancient cataclysm. As the shuttle door opened, a wave of cold air hit them, and the team stepped out onto the barren ground. The ground beneath their boots was cracked, as though the planet itself had been slowly dying for millennia. "Stay sharp," Marcus ordered as he glanced around. "We don't know what to expect here." Irina nodded, her gaze scanning the horizon. The Xyxarrians had given no specifics about where the duel would take place, so Marcus had opted to land on the planet's most remote location. They were met with nothing, no welcoming party, no soldiers, just the eerie silence of the world around them. As they moved forward, the sound of a distant rumble reached their ears. A shape emerged from the darkened horizon. A massive figure, towering above the rocky landscape. The figure was humanoid but strange, with 4 arms and an elongated body, its skin gleaming with an iridescent metallic hue. Its eyes were large and black, reflecting nothing, like 2 endless voids. "We are the Xyxarrians," the being said, its voice a deep, resonating echo that seemed to vibrate through the air. "You are the human chosen to accept our challenge?" Marcus stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The figure before him was monstrous, unlike any enemy he had ever faced. He could feel the weight of the moment. He was being tested, not just as a fighter, but as the embodiment of humanity itself. "I am Marcus Byrne, captain of the Phoenix," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "I accept your challenge. What are the terms?" Xyxarri, this was the name of the Xyxarrian before him, tilted its head slightly, as if considering Marcus's words. "Survival is the term," Xyxarri said simply. "The duel is to prove your worth, human. We will test your strength. If you defeat me, we will leave you in peace. If you fail, your species will be deemed weak and unworthy of further contact." Marcus's mind raced as he absorbed the implications of the challenge. There was no room for negotiation, no way out. The Xyxarrians were not asking for diplomacy, they were demanding a test of strength. But what if this wasn't just about physical strength? What if it was a test of humanity itself? "You don't understand what you're asking for," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "You're not just fighting me. You're challenging everything that humanity is. I am who I am. It's the purest true purity that any people, system, or task can girl-like." Xyxarri's expression remained unreadable. "We know what we are asking, Captain Byrne. We have seen the power of your species in the past. We will see it now." Without warning, Xyxarri raised one of its massive arms, and the ground around them trembled as if in response. The alien's muscles rippled, and its 4 arms began to move in a fluid, coordinated rhythm. It was clear that Xyxarri was no ordinary warrior. It was a being of incredible strength, a predator in its own right. Marcus didn't flinch. He knew what he had to do. This wasn't just about victory. It was about survival, for Earth, for humanity. The duel began almost immediately. Xyxarri launched itself toward Marcus with terrifying speed, its 4 arms moving in a blur of motion. Each strike was a deadly force that would have crushed a normal opponent. But Marcus was no ordinary opponent. He had trained for years to fight against the best, human or alien. and now he had to use everything he knew to survive. The ground cracked beneath them as Marcus danced out of the way of Xyxarri's blows, narrowly avoiding the alien's crushing fists. He had to stay focused, had to stay one step ahead. His muscles burned with exertion, but the rush of adrenaline kept him going. Marcus wasn't just fighting for his life, he was fighting for something bigger. He was fighting for Earth, for the future of humanity, for the reputation of the species he loved. With a roar, Marcus launched himself at Xyxarri, landing a punch against the alien's armored chest. Xyxarri staggered but quickly recovered, swinging a massive arm in retaliation. Marcus barely dodged the blow, the wind from Xyxarri's fist nearly knocking him off his feet. But Marcus wasn't finished. He fought with a tenacity, a raw, primal strength that surprised even himself. He had fought wars, faced death countless times, but this was different. This was more than just a fight for survival. This was a fight for the very soul of humanity. The cold, unforgiving winds of Xyxarri battered the Phoenix as it settled onto the barren surface of the alien planet. Its engines hummed softly before shutting off completely, leaving the landing bay in an eerie silence. The crew inside the ship moved with practiced precision, preparing to disembark. Marcus stood at the helm, his eyes narrowed in thought as the distant horizon stretched out before him, a vast expanse of rocky plains and jagged mountains. Xyxarri had always been known as a world of stone and desolation, and the first sight of the planet lived up to its reputation. The once vibrant blue skies now carried a pallid, lifeless gray hue, and the harsh winds carried nothing but dust and the faint smell of metallic decay. There were no cities, no signs of advanced life, only the raw, jagged contours of the land, seemingly untouched by time. Marcus took a slow breath and straightened his jacket, the weight of the situation pressing on his chest. As captain of the Phoenix, he'd faced dangers on dozens of worlds, but this felt different. The Xyxarrians were a species that valued intellect, logic, and control, not violence. They had never shown an interest in physical combat, and that made this challenge all the more peculiar. Irina Sato, his first officer, stepped up beside him. She was tall, sharp-eyed, and a model of efficiency, always calculating every possible scenario. Today, however, she seemed just as uneasy as Marcus. Her lips were pursed, her brow furrowed with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "We've never faced a species like this," Irina said, her voice tinged with caution. "They've never issued challenges of physical strength. This feels off, Captain." Marcus glanced at her, meeting her gaze. "I know, Lieutenant. But if there's one thing I've learned in all my years in space, it's that everything, every conflict, every encounter has its purpose. The Xyxarrians might be testing us, but we don't know how or why. Then what do we do when we face them? If it's a trap, a test, or something more..." Irina trailed off, knowing that whatever the answer was, it wasn't going to be simple. "We don't have a choice, Irina. We face them head-on, and we show them who we are. Whatever happens, we have to fight for Earth, for the future." The shuttle's hatch opened with a hydraulic hiss, and Marcus, along with Irina and a small team of the Phoenix's best combatants, stepped onto the rocky surface. The air, despite its thinness, was biting cold, and Marcus could feel it immediately, his breath coming out in visible puffs of vapor. His boots crunched against the hard earth, and he tightened his grip on the plasma rifle at his side, although he knew it would be of little use in what was coming. The horizon seemed to stretch on forever, the barren world extending in all directions with no end in sight. There were no signs of civilization, no other life forms either. The planet was ancient, devoid of the vibrancy that humanity had come to associate with life. They moved forward, the wind howling as it whipped across their faces. Marcus's senses were heightened, every step measured and deliberate. He could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. This was the edge of the unknown, and whatever awaited them was about to reveal itself. Minutes passed before they reached a small plateau, a raised section of land that offered a panoramic view of the area. It was here that they paused, all eyes scanning the barren expanse for any signs of the Xyxarrians. And then, just as Marcus thought the moment had passed, he saw it. A figure appeared on the distant horizon. It was impossible to make out at first, just a shadow moving against the bleak landscape. But as it grew nearer, its form became clearer. It was tall, with a slender yet powerful build, its skin an iridescent shade that shimmered in the dim light of Xyxarri's two suns. The creature had 4 arms, its body elongated with a sharp and angular shape that reminded Marcus of an insect, predatory and yet oddly graceful. The Xyxarrian champion, Xyxarri. "Ready yourselves," Marcus said in a low voice, his instincts kicking into overdrive. He raised his chin slightly, preparing himself mentally. This was it. The challenge had begun. As Xyxarri approached, the air seemed to grow thicker, charged with the same energy that crackled just before a storm. The Xyxarrian's eyes, black and infinite, locked onto Marcus with an intensity that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. There was something unnerving about those eyes, a coldness that felt devoid of empathy, of understanding. Xyxarri's voice was deep, resonant, and its tone was almost hypnotic. "You are the human chosen to face me? I am Xyxarri, champion of Xyxarri." Marcus stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "I am Captain Marcus Byrne, and I accept your challenge. I fight for my people and for the future of Earth." The alien's lips parted in what might have been a smile, though its expression was more alien than anything human. "Your species is fascinating. I have studied you from afar, weak in body yet strong in spirit. But strength is not enough to survive in the universe. Strength is earned. And prepare to see just how strong humanity is," Marcus said. He flexed his fingers, cracking his knuckles, feeling the weight of the weapon at his side. He wasn't here just for himself. He was here for Earth, for all of humanity, and he wasn't about to let that future slip away. Without another word, Xyxarri lunged forward. Its massive arms moved with terrifying speed, 2 of them reaching out to strike at Marcus. But Marcus had been trained for this. He dodged, sidestepping the first strike with an agility that belied his size. The second blow, a wide swing aimed at his chest, he narrowly avoided by diving to the side. The ground beneath his feet cracked with the force of Xyxarri's strikes. The alien champion's sheer power was overwhelming, each blow sending tremors through the ground. Marcus felt the sting of adrenaline flooding his body, and his mind raced to calculate his next move. He was fast, he knew that, but he was also human, and against a creature like Xyxarri, raw speed alone wouldn't be enough. Marcus spun to his feet, his body moving with a grace that was the result of years of combat training. He reached for a weapon, a plasma knife at his side, and slashed it in a precise arc. The blade connected with Xyxarri's arm, but the alien's tough skin barely seemed to flinch. Xyxarri paused, seemingly unfazed by the strike, and looked down at the small cut. "Is that all you have, human?" it said, its voice a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Your weapons are nothing compared to my strength." Marcus gritted his teeth. This wasn't just about strength. He had to outsmart Xyxarri, to use the environment, to play on the alien's lack of unpredictability. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its raw power. It was its ability to think outside the box, to adapt to any situation, and to persevere in the face of overwhelming odds. Without warning, Marcus vaulted over the alien's next strike, landing behind Xyxarri. He grabbed a piece of jagged rock from the ground, using it to create distance between himself and the alien. Xyxarri spun, its four arms coming at him from all sides, but Marcus was already moving again, quicker than the Xyxarrian anticipated. "You underestimate us," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "We're not just warriors, we're survivors." Back at the Phoenix, Irina and the rest of the crew watched through the viewports as the fight raged on below them. The team had set up a communications relay on the ship, linking them to Marcus's combat helmet. Through the live feed, they could see the chaos unfolding in real time. Irina clenched her fists, frustration and worry building with each passing moment. She had seen Marcus fight before, had witnessed his unparalleled skill and fierce determination. But this was different. Xyxarri wasn't just any opponent. This was a battle that would define the future of humanity's relationship with the Xyxarrians. If Marcus lost, if the Phoenix failed to win the duel, Earth's fate could be sealed. "I don't like this," Irina muttered under her breath, her eyes glued to the feed. "I don't like the way Xyxarri is playing with him." "Don't worry, Lieutenant," one of the other crew members said, trying to offer reassurance. "Captain Byrne has faced worse odds and come out on top. He won't lose." "I hope you're right," Irina said softly, though doubt gnawed at her insides. This wasn't a simple fight. It was a test of humanity itself. The stakes were higher than any of them realized. Meanwhile, on the surface, Marcus was beginning to understand the true nature of his opponent. Xyxarri was not just strong. It was fast, intelligent, and relentless. Every move the alien made was calculated, every strike deliberate. The longer the battle dragged on, the more Marcus realized that victory wouldn't come easily. But then again, humanity had never been known for doing things the easy way. As Xyxarri advanced toward him, Marcus wiped the blood from his lips, a deep resolve setting into his heart. This was no longer just about physical strength. It was a battle of wills. And if there was one thing he knew about humanity, it was that when pushed to the limit, they would always rise. This was Earth's fight, and Marcus was going to make sure it wasn't one they would lose. The air was thick with tension. Every gust of wind on Xyxarri seemed to amplify the pounding of Marcus's heart as he circled his alien opponent, Xyxarri. The rocky plateau beneath their feet trembled with the force of the blows exchanged, a harsh reminder of how much was at stake. The Phoenix loomed high above them in orbit, and Marcus couldn't afford to think of it, couldn't afford to think of Earth. Not now. The Xyxarrian champion was everything Marcus had feared and more, a gargantuan, multi-limbed predator with an intimidating, almost regal presence. Its shimmering, iridescent skin flickered with strange hues under the twin suns of Xyxarri, each step it took sending waves of vibration through the desolate plain. Xyxarri's deep black eyes fixed on him, full of cold calculation, as though it were studying him not just as a foe, but as an anomaly. Despite the overwhelming strength of the Xyxarrian, Marcus knew he had the one advantage that no alien could replicate: the unpredictable nature of a human. Marcus narrowed his eyes, assessing his opponent's every move. Xyxarri's forearms swung with remarkable precision and speed, but Marcus had learned to read the rhythms of the alien's motions. He dodged the first strike, a mighty swing of Xyxarri's left arm, and countered with a quick jab to the side of its torso. But the alien barely flinched. The blow hadn't done nearly enough damage to incapacitate the creature, and it retaliated with a swift kick that sent Marcus tumbling backward, his back slamming against the rocky surface with a sickening crunch. The wind was knocked from his lungs. For a moment he saw stars. The pain surged, but he forced it aside, struggling to his feet. He knew he couldn't afford to take too many of those kinds of hits. Every second of this fight counted. Every breath, every movement was critical. Xyxarri was relentless, and it was clear that it wasn't holding back. Marcus wiped the blood from his mouth and focused on his breathing, steadying himself. There was something about the way Xyxarri fought. It was strategic, controlled, almost like it was toying with him. The realization hit Marcus like a bolt of lightning. Xyxarri wasn't just testing his physical strength. It was testing humanity itself. This was more than a duel. It was a philosophical challenge, a question posed by the alien race. Are humans worthy of survival in the cosmos? Are they truly capable of facing the harsh realities of the universe? Marcus's chest heaved with the realization. His body ached, his muscles screamed in protest, but his mind sharpened. Humanity had always been defined by its drive, its passion, its refusal to accept defeat. He wasn't going to give up. He couldn't. Above, in the Phoenix, the crew sat in tense silence, watching the live feed as the fight unfolded below them. Irina Sato stood before the command console, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her eyes scanning the data streams. Every second that passed, she could feel the weight of the situation pulling at her. The tension among the crew was palpable. They could feel it too. This wasn't just a fight for Marcus. It was a fight for their future. It was a fight for Earth. "Lieutenant, what's the status on the atmospheric readings?" Captain Tanner asked from his station, his voice tight with anxiety. Irina didn't take her eyes off the screen as she spoke. "The atmosphere's stable for now. The Xyxarrians are keeping their distance. But if Marcus fails, they'll consider Earth unworthy. We may lose more than just an ally if this goes south." She didn't need to say more. Everyone in the room knew what was at stake. The Xyxarrians had long been a mysterious but respected species, one that maintained its distance from the more warlike factions of the galaxy. For them to challenge Earth to a duel was an unprecedented move, and one that couldn't be taken lightly. Captain Tanner moved to stand beside her, his face grim. "If anyone can handle this, it's Marcus. But we need to prepare for any contingency. Get the comms open to the surrounding fleets, just in case." Irina gave a curt nod. She wasn't sure what "just in case" meant, but she knew that in this situation every possible scenario had to be considered. Down below, the battle between Marcus and Xyxarri raged on. Marcus was growing more accustomed to the rhythm of the fight, his body moving with increased precision as he evaded Xyxarri's vicious strikes. His mind was focused entirely on the moment, every muscle working in perfect synchronization with his thoughts. He was no longer just reacting, he was anticipating, calculating. Xyxarri swung its right arm toward him, aiming to crush him with the force of a collapsing mountain. But Marcus was faster now. He ducked low, rolling beneath the alien's massive limbs, and with all his strength, he thrust the plasma knife in his hand into the side of Xyxarri's midsection. The blade bit deep into the Xyxarrian's tough skin. But to Marcus's surprise, the creature didn't howl in pain. Instead, it paused, a look of contemplation crossing its alien face. "Interesting," Xyxarri's voice rumbled, sounding almost pleased. "You are more capable than I thought." Marcus didn't respond. He couldn't afford to let his guard down, not even for a second. Xyxarri was still too dangerous. The moment of hesitation didn't last long. With a sudden twist of its body, Xyxarri flung Marcus to the side with the sheer force of its limbs. He hit the ground hard, pain blooming across his ribs. But he wasn't out. He couldn't be. He gasped for air, the wind knocked out of him, but he rolled to his feet, blood dripping from a cut along his brow. His eyes locked onto Xyxarri. "You're going to have to do better than that," Marcus called out, his voice steady, though he could feel the weight of fatigue creeping into his muscles. "I'm not done yet." Back on the Phoenix, Irina was watching the fight with increasing worry. Marcus's movements were becoming more sluggish, more predictable. He was starting to show signs of exhaustion, and the Xyxarrian hadn't even broken a sweat. It was clear that Marcus was being pushed to his limits. Her fingers hovered over the console. She knew Marcus wouldn't give up. It wasn't in his nature. But what if that wasn't enough? What if the fight was already lost? "Commander, we're picking up strange readings," Lieutenant Gomez said from his station, interrupting her thoughts. "It's coming from Xyxarri's North Pole, something big." Irina's heart skipped a beat. She looked at the tactical map of Xyxarri's surface, focusing on the coordinates. "What's causing the readings?" she demanded. "It's not clear yet. It's like some kind of energy buildup," Gomez replied, his voice tense. Whatever it is, it's on a massive scale. If it's a weapon, it could interfere with our communications and weapons systems." Arena turned quickly toward Captain Tanner. "Sir, if Marcus doesn't end this fight soon, we could be looking at a much larger threat. The Xyxarrians may be preparing something." Tanner's face went pale. "Keep an eye on it. We can't afford to lose contact with Marcus now. Prepare to deploy emergency backup teams if needed. We can't risk Earth's safety." Marcus wasn't sure how much longer he could keep this up. His arms were heavy, his legs felt like lead, and his mind was clouded with exhaustion. But every time Xyxarri lunged toward him, every time those forearms swung with destructive intent, something inside him snapped into focus again. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the pride of his species. This alien, this Xyxarri, had underestimated him. The Xyxarrian champion had thought that humanity was weak, that it was incapable of true strength. But Marcus knew better. He had seen it all. The will to survive, the drive to fight against impossible odds. Humanity's strength wasn't in physical power. It was in spirit. It was in the refusal to ever give up no matter the cost. Marcus could see the tiniest flicker of doubt in Xyxarri's eyes. For the first time since the duel began, the alien seemed to hesitate, just for a fraction of a second. That was all Marcus needed. With a surge of energy, he lunged forward, using the last of his strength to strike directly at Xyxarri's throat. His fist collided with the alien's vulnerable spot with a crack of bone, and Xyxarri staggered back, gasping for air. The blow wasn't just a physical strike. It was a statement, a declaration. "Humanity does not surrender," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "Not now, not ever." Xyxarri's eyes widened in disbelief. The alien took a step back, its many arms hanging limply at its sides. It was stunned, the creature not used to being struck in such a vulnerable way. And then, to Marcus's shock, Xyxarri bowed its head in acknowledgement. "You have proven your strength," the alien said, its voice softer now, almost reverential. "Perhaps humanity is worthy of survival after all." Marcus's chest heaved with exhaustion. He didn't have the strength left for words. But the victory was his. The fight was over.